Welcome to The Blueprint, the podcast spotlighting innovators, builders, and visionary leaders reshaping our Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world. I am your host, Dr.Jelani. Today's guest, Saelese Haynes, is a bold thinker, a brilliant attorney, and a living example of what it means to just say yes. As a multi-jurisdictional lawyer, international speaker, founder of Titan Chambers and youth advocate, she is on a mission to build a life and a career that honors both excellence and experience. But beyond the glamour and beyond the accolades, Saelese is a devoted mother, a mentor to many, and a champion for the next generation. This is the blueprint of Saelese Haynes. So welcome, Saelese. Welcome to the Blueprint.
Thank you very much. I feel very welcome.
How has your morning been so far?
So I've been up since 2 a.m. Today's my daughter's birthday party. So it's been hectic, but that's just like a normal day in your life as well.
Oh, well, we have to thank your daughter for lending you to us this morning.
Right? I know, because she's so excited and has like 1,000,001 plans.
And how old is she turning today?
She turned 8 earlier this month.
Right. Oh,
we were abroad at the time, so
right.
I wasn't even planning to have a party for her. But she insisted that she wanted a chance. She guilt trips me all the time because her birthday is in the vacation, and she's like, everybody else, they get to celebrate with their friends and they get to have a cake and share with all their friends in school, and then she doesn't. So this is her makeup.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. She has a perfect mom.
Can you say that again?
We'll send her the clip, don't worry.
Yes.
All right, so let's begin where it all started. So we know Saelese as an attorney at law. What drew you to law in the first place?
So that's a fantastic question. I actually wanted to be a doctor, a neurosurgeon actually, and I was doing all science subjects, but then I realized I was actually very queasy, and I was thinking maybe medicine isn't it. So it's still, I don't know, maybe I might still go down that route at some point in my life, but it just felt like law was the next best alternative. I was a very, very quiet child, so people who knew me back then are very surprised that I'm an attorney. But one thing I was always very passionate about was like rights and justice and making sure that people feel heard. So even though I didn't speak much, I only spoke when I felt like I had something to share. People listened when I spoke, especially because, I wasn't always talking. So it was weird actually in school. Like I would like just visibly see everybody get silent when I started speaking. So it was very, very strange. And strangely enough, people feel like this is a good career path for me. And it makes sense, but it wasn't the first choice.
So it's interesting. So we have quiet Saelese that has become an advocate. So my next question is, where did you find your voice?
So that's the thing. I think I always had it. So people that were very, very close to me, like in my family circle, they knew that I was spicy from like day one. But other persons, I didn't engage much and like interact much with other people. So they just thought I was quiet and shy. I wouldn't describe myself as shy, because once I felt like I needed to have something said, I had no problem. It was just that I didn't feel the need to always jump into everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess you have embraced the philosophy that we know what we try to teach our kids. Not because you have a mouth, you open it to talk.
All the time,
all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So in terms of your family background, so we know that science and medicine would have been the line and direction that you were going down. Is it that you had lawyers in your family? Is it that you know?
No.
And what about some of the learning lessons that you would have gained from your parents or family or friends that has assisted you in the person that you're in today?
So I am very, very grateful that I had family members who always believed in me. I was the firstborn and kind of unexpected. And then at the point when I was born, my grandmom had 5 kids and they were all still at home. They were all young adults, they started working, and exploring their own career options. And then I came along and I was like everybody's baby, sort of. So I benefited from having that very wide community to the point where even, when my mom left the home, I stayed with my grandmom. And it was on paper my choice. It was at 4, that was what I said I wanted. But of course, my grandmother was extra happy that, it was probably planted. Cut that out. But I vocalized that I wanted to stay with her. So she grew up almost as my mom, and there was that fantastic support. Like, now that I'm older, I do see like the perfect example. They always say grandparents make the best parents. Well, they're better parents as grandparents, and I saw that. So even a lot of the things that my mom and her siblings would not have been able to do, like they can go and say they wanted to stay by somebody's house, even at 23, that was unheard of. Yes. Like, no, you're not. But at a young age, like at 16, I went on a trip with the other colleagues and those kind of things. And it was because I think, she would have seen one, she trusted me, and 2, she would have seen the wisdom perhaps of, like a rounder education. And I think too, just being very frank, as a grandparent, you don't have it as hard as when you're dealing with the children and the stress and paying the mortgage and all of those things put together. Yes. And I see it with my mom now too. So one example of that is, like, I distinctly remember, this is a core memory for me. I remember being at home. She came over and she was making me breakfast, and I was like, I don't eat bread. And she was like, eat the bread, I work hard, whole diatribe. And so 30 years later, we're in a similar kitchen, and my mom, my daughter, and myself are there. My daughter jumps up, I don't eat bread. So, of course, I'm the one who's like, no, you're going to eat the bread, Of course, my mom comes there, hero. No, she doesn't like bread. And then promptly goes to make pancakes. Yes. It's like the irony.
Yes. I always remember, it is even my family, my grandmother. So aunts and uncles, climb the mango tree and that kind of thing. And the fall, all right, cool, that's a part of life. But, when they're grandchildren, the world must stop.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you have introduced a topic that's important, though. And that is the family structure for, I guess, what Trinidad and Tobago was known as. We always had the extended family unit. So it wasn't just the mom, dad, and kids. Yeah. You always had the aunts and uncles. You always had the grandparents. And to be quite frank, you always had the community, the village, the tribe.
Yes.
But we find ourselves now in a society where we all are asked to drink water and mind our business. we find ourselves where there's so much family conflict as well in terms of the structure, aunts and uncles not talking to each other.
Yes.
And to be honest, growing up, I'm sure you may have had aunts and uncles, but all of them were your moms and dads, which means that they had the same, they could have cut your tail just as your parents.
Yeah.
They could have criticized, they could have pulled you up.
Had some inputs.
Yeah. And we see all of that has been pushed aside for something new. And I don't know if some of the societal problems that we have is a result of that. What do you think about that?
So definitely, yes, I would say that the community benefits from that sort of support. But then realistically too, each era has its own problems and ills, and I think that, so like for instance, you mentioned the licks and the cuttail. My grandmother's children got licks. Her grandchild did not. So, even things like that, like I'm not sure as a parent now, I'm not sure I would want my cousin or I have a brother, but he wouldn't. But, if he was inclined to, I wouldn't want him pulling up my child in a certain way, because I feel like the parenting aspect of it has to remain with the parent. Cool. And we have such different ideologies and different stances that it really isn't for everybody to have an input all the time. So yes, that back then was an ideal or a good solution, but we have to find a way to modernize that without losing the essence of the community and still having people to rely on, but with boundaries, like defined boundaries. Because, I mean, we could go into this and talk about a whole lot of different things. You know, the underbelly of that and the dark side, the uncle who was giving the sweeties and expecting, you know. So, so there was good, but there was bad. But I think what we need to do now is not eschew the good and copy the bad, but not ignore the structure altogether. So just take what benefits and recognize and acknowledge what didn't and kind of try to cut that down. And I think that would be better, would make us better off.
Absolutely correct. As you said, let's keep essence of what the lesson was, and modernize it in the new context, because I presume every generation does have the rights to make its own adjustments according to the societal standards at the time. So let's pivot a little bit. So Saelese, you have had the benefit and opportunity to practice and study in many jurisdictions in Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like, and what are some of the lessons that you would have learned that you think that we can bring back to Trinidad, that you would like to see in Trinidad?
Oh, how much time do we have? So I think, one of the first things for me early on, like Trinidad is such a weird place and space. So I feel like we're so forward thinking and open in certain respects, but then there are other elements that are taboo that don't necessarily need to be. And just a very small example of that is like when I worked in London, for instance, nobody was Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith. You know, it was expected that you get along with your colleagues on a first name basis. But here, if you come into a ministry and you do not say Mrs. whatever it is, Mrs. Haynes. And for me too, when I came back and I was working, that was strange for me because I was young. I was very young. And then it would be like older persons having to, show that, I would say in some respects, fake respect, because they would do it on paper, they would do it out loud, but then have the worst things to say about you in the quiet spaces. And that's why I find that there's that awkward paradox. And I think that whole drink water and mind your business thing, I think we could do a bit more of that. Yeah. And then, so when I lived in London as well, it was only when I was leaving and coming back to Trinidad, I realized that the last flat that I lived in, where I was for over 2 years, I'd never seen or met my neighbors. And I was like, that's so cool. I love that. But coming back to Trinidad, literally everybody in your business. I remember going to look for an apartment to rent, and I found a place, went to visit it, went back the other day because I found another apartment on the same street that I wanted to look at, and there was an old man there who was like, "Oh, I see you yesterday, you get through it, what you want?" Like, sir.
So that was mind-blowing.
Yeah. In London, nobody has time for you. But just as we said, there's also the dark side of that too, where you could be dead in your flat for a month and nobody even knows that. Yeah. So I think it's the same point that I was making earlier. If we sit and examine like what we want to take and what we want to keep, but doing that consciously and like really examining deeply the pros and cons, then I think that makes a lot of sense.
That's it's interesting, the views that you have, in the sense that, so I am 30 years old, and
I'm 30 in my head.
And I've had the opportunity to have responsibility for organizations and for persons that are senior to me in age.
Yes.
And, when I'm speaking with them, it is Mr. and Miss. And they would say, "No, Jelani, you could call me by my first name." And that is so difficult for me. It is literally like,
You have to force yourself.
To do that. And it's all about because of how our culture of growing up.
Yeah.
And when you really look abroad, you see, younger persons and we calling adults by their first name, that kind of thing. So that's interesting. Now, there's another part of it, and it's about the leadership aspect. So the world over, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, is seeing where younger persons are taking leadership, and it is leadership over individuals who are senior to them in age and may have very well been in an organization for decades.
Oh, and that's a big thing. That's seniority.
That seniority mindset. And I guess the world has moved past seniority by age and now seniority by your qualifications, your ability to get the job done, your skills, right? And many young persons have faced that issue of combating that. You know that you have the ability, you're getting the job done, but the talking in the background, the persons that are trying to undermine you, and you, as you would have indicated, you had that experience. How did you deal and treat with that?
So, because I am not the kind of person to necessarily let those things bother me, it just
that's the English experience.
Slid off my back. It's like, I find that funny. You have a whole hour to talk about me. Okay, cool. I guess you don't have anything else to do. That's nice for you. Yeah. But, and that's not to say that always happens, because we all have our moments of weakness. We all have our moments of where you're unsure. We all have our moments of self-doubt and, those internal conversations that you have with yourself. And if those two things bounce up at the same time, then of course it's going to get under my skin. But generally, on the whole, it was just like knowing I'm very focused, like laser focused. So I am going to stay true to my goal, as long as I have one.
Yes.
And if you're on board with that and you could support me and I could support you, then that's perfect. If not, then that also works for me. I think you have to be focused and goal-oriented.
And put aside the noise.
Yeah. Forget the voices.
Now, one of the interesting things so far in our conversation is that you are not afraid at all to change direction.
Yeah.
You as a matter of fact, once it is that you are convinced, so initially you wanted to do medicine, decided that you're going to do law, and then you said that, who knows, in the future I may decide to go back into medicine, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting because as young persons growing up or in a society like ours, you believe that whatever you decide to do, that's it, and you must stay the course. And and as we go along in our conversation and people get to know you even more, you'd realize that even in your practice of law, you have switched. You have switched.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the thing. For so many persons, you have the energy, you have the dream, the aspiration to switch, but to actually do it is the big problem. How is it so easy for you?
Easy, it's not, for sure, I would say. So I would have attended a seminar a couple of years ago, and I remember reaching out to one of the speakers at the seminar because he had built a business that he sold for $5 billion. And at that time, I was making a serious decision around what I wanted to do in life, and I was thinking about making a very big change. But it's weird because you always have that question in the back of your mind as, am I being ungrateful for what I have a certain level of stability. Am I willing to give that up to start over? Am I not making the right decision? You do have those questions. So I reached out to him for some advice because he was talking about, selling that thing that he had built for 11 years that was very successful and starting from scratch. And he messaged me, and we were able to meet up, and we spoke, we went out, we had drinks, and the best advice that I got from him actually wasn't from anything that he said, but just from being able to see how he viewed the world. And it was essentially this, that if you have it in your heart and you have it as if you keep feeling pulled to do it, like you just have to. There's no other way. And once you have to, you will make it work. Even if you don't make it work, it's a lesson for something else that is coming up in your future. And I think that bit of it, the last bit of it, was the most important takeaway for me, because we tend to see failure as a stop or as an indictment on who you are personally, but the most successful people are successful because they failed. They don't publicize like, okay, I had 10 companies and one rose to become a unicorn and, sold for $1 billion. But they tried so many different things that eventually they were just able to get the one that stuck, and that eclipsed everything else. But they certainly did have a whole bed of failures in the wake of that.
That's interesting. Failure. And I'm actually grateful that you brought that in, because to be honest, that's probably one of the biggest factors that stops people. It's an obstacle from trying.
Me too. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I remember, I guess in my latter teenage years, coming over a quote from Winston Churchill, where he said that the credit doesn't belong to the critic, but it belongs to the person who tries. I'm paraphrasing here, right? And that stuck with me. I never knew why, but it stuck with me because, let's look at it from the point of view of society. It's very easy to criticize. It's very to say, ha, ha, ha,
when you're comfortable.
Yes, right? And then from the point of view of the individual, as they said with so many leaders and so many inventors, we remember the success, the end result, that one break that they got, and didn't recognize that, hey, it was trial,
an iteration.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is the part of it, is the persons who succeed, the persons who have reached in life, in society, who have reached the pinnacle of their own story, didn't come about because it was a one-shot,
Absolutely. And if it was a one-shot, then they were just extremely lucky. That is not the standard and base.
Correct.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your one-shots, your law firm. So you have this young lady who has returned from the United Kingdom and from all over the world, and decided that, when I come back to Trinidad, I'm going to set up shop.
I had no idea that was going to happen. It wasn't on the books at that point.
Walk us through this story.
So when I came back to Trinidad, I was on a scholarship in the UK, so I was bonded to come back and work locally. And I worked for a couple different government organizations for a bit. And in at least one of them, I loved what I was doing, for sure. The others, it just felt it didn't really feel like there was a lot of options for upward mobility. And that was always very important to me. So I would have moved on into the corporate world. And I kept feeling like I needed more, like I needed to have more control over what I did on a day-to-day basis. So I remember like one of my last jobs, for instance, I would literally just be like dressed and ready to go to work and sit on my couch eating a bowl of cornflakes and like eating it so slowly, like every single flake separately. And it was just, I reached to a point where I was like, yeah, this isn't making sense. You're not feeling inspired. You're not feeling like you want to get up and go every morning. And that's super important for me because I'm very driven. So then I started thinking about the options, and I was like, okay, well, the economy not that great, so get another job. What am I going to do? And I can't even remember where like the original spark of it. Oh, actually, so I was still working, and I got the keys to, I thought, hey, it was, I just remembered. So it was a matter that I had with a very accomplished attorney, and he said something to me. I didn't know that it was the topic, the title of a book at the time. But he said something to me about, A students working for the government and C students running businesses. And I was like, hey, like that really made me think a lot about what I wanted out of life. And so I still wasn't convinced at that point. I got a building for the office and wasting money. I had the office there, I had the keys, and for a couple months, I just walked around with the keys, and I was like, you know what? If anybody tell me anything today, that's it. But it's always so when you have a sure salary at the end of the month, you can be vexed for the whole month, and then on payday is the best day ever.
Yes.
So I kept going through that cycle for a couple of months, and then when it came towards the end of my contract, I was like, you know what, I am ready to move on. I am ready to do something different. So that's when I really started in earnest to make it work, and that's been 6 years.
So, there's a concept that I don't know if it's just a local thing or this is something international, where they always talk about paying your dues. So that
that's big in our local legal landscape.
Yeah, and I am of two minds on that, right? What are your thoughts about it?
I've had some interesting experiences with that. So I consider myself very lucky because the law firm that I worked with at first, the gentleman that owns and runs it, I still consider him a mentor. He was fantastic. He was very, very good to me. But a lot of my friends who are in firms, they never had that experience, and I consider it chalk and cheese. And then I even had an experience recently where every year, of course, the law students and those at Hugh Wooding, they're looking for internships and they're looking for things to do. And one girl came to me and she said, so how much do I have to pay? And I was confused, right? Literally, legitimately confused. I was like, I thought she made a mistake. I was like, what do you mean, how much you have to pay me? And she was like, well, I know some people charge. So apparently, yeah, that's a thing. Like, there are people who charge you to come in and be their intern, and that was wild to me. And even when I was job hunting and seeing some of the salaries, it is intense, it's crazy. And now being in my own practice and being an employer, I understand why you may not be able to pay somebody what they probably are worth, but bills be billing. And I'm really grateful to have had that experience of being on both sides of the table. But yeah, I really don't understand how people survive. In one of my first jobs, I was at Courts Megastore. Probably shouldn't say the name. In one of my first jobs, I was at a company, and I remember I think I was 17 turning 18. And most of the times I didn't even have money to go to work, but there were people earning the same thing that I was earning who had 4 children.
Yes, so for me, I got that same experience, and how they're able to do it, I'm shocked.
I am shocked, flabbergasted, yes. All the extensions of that word.
Yes, that's interesting. Now, there's something that you always talk about in terms of your business strategy, and it's the exit strategy. What does that mean? What does exit strategy mean, and how do you implement it?
That's so loaded. So for me, the exit strategy is actually leaving Trinidad. It's branched off over the years though. So now when I think exit strategy, and unfortunately I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs think about this, but it is how you can close something successfully and move on. And as I said, for me, that really started with a plan to leave Trinidad. I'm the biggest and best Trini if I'm not in Trinidad, but when I'm here, I feel stifled. So that's part of it. But as part of my role in business development, I see a lot of persons start up businesses, and the difference that I see in markets, more developed markets, in the US, for instance, people, as part of their business formation, they already have a goal to where they want to get to. So it's okay, in 5 years, I wanna market cap. I want to have a Series A funding round that's $100 million. This is the goal. This is how I plan to do it. And this is what I want to do next. And I don't think we have that here locally, because even entrepreneurs, most of the businesses that we have are family owned. They continue, the ones that survive anyway, they continue from generation to generation. And it's like, all right, you know, if you're the oldest son, you're expected to
take it up,
yes,
and carry it on,
and hand it over to your oldest.
Yes.
Yeah, you know. So I think that also needs to be a part of where we grow our business incubator, I suppose, like having those wider conversations, bringing more money in, so that in turn increases the capital available to our businesses. We don't have that startup culture, and I think there are many ways that we're trapped because of that. I know there are organizations and institutions that, you know, bring seed funding and do a little bit of it, but people are more likely to go the route of, like, you know, asking for loans, getting assistance, but we don't have that way to manage and, like, manage more, to scale.
Yes.
We see growth, but we don't see that scaling in most instances.
So I'm going to bring you back now. So now that we have understood the exit strategy plan, let's go back now to where we have Saelese sitting down on the couch eating the cornflakes. Contract has come to an end.
Yeah.
And Saelese has decided, all right, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself. And I get the sense that Saelese, by nature, is very free-spirited.
Yeah, very much.
So, you know, we come from a society where you are built to work for somebody, either for the government or for private sector. And Saelese, having that free-spirited, decided again, I'll better myself and I'm going solo. Now, the first couple of months, and this is for the benefit of entrepreneurs, the first couple of months, I'm pretty sure, have been difficult.
Dire.
Right?
Yeah.
And the constant second guessing, you know, did I make the right choice?
Absolutely.
You know, and there would have been times where you would have come to almost to the conclusion where probably I should go back to the...
I still have that conversation even now. Yeah.
Right? But yet still, 6 years has passed. And I remember one of our earlier conversation we had on the podcast with one of our other guests. It was sort of the same kind of mindset, you know, and the same sets of issues in terms of first couple of months, first couple of years. And in fact, I think business books say first 5 years most difficult. That's when it is that it takes the time for business to break. But how do you keep so focused, and how do you keep true to self, meaning that, hey, I'm going to see this to the end? That's the question.
I think that's naturally how I am. So even with my daughter, for instance, like, I love it that she's willing to try all of these different things: drums, piano, violin, singing, moko jambi, walking. She's willing to try everything. What she's not so willing to do is stick with something, because she wants to try everything, right? But I keep telling her, I'm like, okay, if we start something, so if we're starting drums this term, you're going to finish drums until the end of the term. And then you could look at doing something else. We could talk about that. But that's always been who I am, that if I start something, I want to see it through until I'm happy with where I can leave it or hand it over. I think that's naturally where I am as a person. And then on top of that too, I think it just, like, we need to have that sort of accountability within ourselves as well, but not be blinded by the fact that sometimes you do need to change and shift and pivot, because that's an important part of it too. And just as you said, you never know what is the right decision. You never know whether you're making a decision to, like, quit something because you're just having a bad day or a bad week or a bad couple of months, or whether to stick with it and see it through. So you don't know if you're being emotional, you don't know if you're being practical. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about one of your exciting projects. Kidpreneur Island.
Yes.
So tell us about it, and why are you so excited about it?
So I didn't come from a business background. I was talking about my grandmom. She never finished school, but she ensured that her children had an education. And similar for me, like it was always a push towards education. You get a good education, you get a good job, you have a good life. Like that was the equation, right? I didn't have people in my family who were business owners. I had people who were entrepreneurial, but that didn't amount to like a fully structured business. And with my daughter, when she came along, she is always, as soon as like she was able to start enunciating how she felt about life and perspective, she's been very entrepreneurial from a very young age. And I have one of my business associates who has a daughter around the same age and the same thing. So the two of them decided to gang up on us, and they insisted, they wanted to have their own business.
They did,
yeah. And that was a couple years ago. My daughter was just 5 at the time, actually. So they started making their own jewelry, and this year in particular, my daughter said, well, she saw me write my own book, and since then she's been behind me for the last 2 years. She wants to write a book, this, that, and the other. So like just seeing how they are taking it seriously, seeing how they remain committed. They used to come into the office on a Friday for an hour or two and like make their jewelry and stuff. And I was like, okay, you know what? They're sticking to it. I love it. Let me try to support and, take it a little bit further. So I helped them with their book this year, which they launched in March. And from that, what we saw was that there were other children who were like, their age, and they wanted to start up their businesses. So we had a workshop, we had different activities, and we got so much encouragement to keep it going that we decided to create like this movement with kids who can support each other in business, buy from each other, so collaborate and that kind of thing. So that's where the concept of Kidpreneur Island came in. And we do want to have more events. We were very grateful that for the first event that we had, we got support from corporate sponsors like Be Mobile Business. So, and this was the girls pitching to Be Mobile Business too. So that was incredible. And we really do want to continue that curation of community within them.
So it is interesting because it's not unique to you. This is just how we are brought up in a Caribbean setting where entrepreneurship or business is not a discussion.
Not talked about.
Yes.
No, it's not on the table.
And I remembered I had the opportunity to go to China, and a part of our seminars, they were pushing us for small island countries to speak about entrepreneurship and business and that type of stuff. And they said, this is why. We know that the Chinese population is 1.3 billion persons, right? And they said that very early in the founding of the modern China, the Chinese government understood there's no way that they can provide jobs.
Yeah.
So at the university level, entrepreneurship is don't matter what degree that you are studying, that's a course that you have to do.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
And the lecturer at the time said that their statistics show for every one new business that opens, they're able to employ or effect employment for 20 persons. So in effect, that's 21 persons, individuals, and 21 families the government doesn't have to
worry about. Yeah.
And I believe that, especially how the economy is going, how the world is changing, that is something that probably that we have to look into as a society. And I am proud of you as a mom to recognize that and to support that, and even for your daughter and her friends, to take that up, because they are not going to see the benefits of it. Well, the true benefit of it until later on in life.
When they need to enter the work career professional for it. Yeah.
And they may be a blessing where they don't even have to enter
Absolutely,
the career path.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So we're going to go into, at least I like it. It's called Rapid Blue.
Okay.
And rapid blues, basically, I'm going to ask you some questions to get to know you a little more.
I'm scared now.
The first response that comes to your mind, that's what I want to hear. All right, so tell me when you're ready.
Let's go.
Ready? Sure? All right, so what's your go-to mantra or motivational quote?
There's one that if you've ever heard me speak, you'd probably have heard it before, is conceive, believe, achieve. That's it's not really a mantra, but it's like a system that governs every decision that I make. So when I have a goal, I go through that cycle, conceive, sitting down and coming up with it, why it makes sense to me at a particular time, believe all the steps that I want to do to make it happen. And like, as I say, faith without works is dead, right? So that's the believe stage, and then achieve, because what I found was that I was just moving through life and like having some successes, but then not focusing on them. Most people I know anyway tend to focus on the negative. So like if something bad happens, that takes up all the time because you're worried, you're thinking, all the worst things are happening to me and me only.
Yeah.
But so the achieve step is really like making sure that you look back and celebrate everything that you've accomplished.
Yes. What's something people are always surprised to learn about you?
I think people think that I'm standoffish. So if they talk to me, I always get this. It's, I didn't know you were so friendly. I didn't know you were, it's so easy to talk to. I even had an encounter with somebody who was in my friend's circle. I didn't know her personally, like to say we had a conversation, but I met her in a social setting, and she was like, I thought you were really... Well, she didn't say mean person, but like that was the context that I got from it. And I was like, what? Okay, we've never even spoken. And she was like, yeah, but you're so normal.
I feel it's probably they're using you in the courtroom setting. So
Probably the black.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you could hold a TED Talk tomorrow, what will the title of that TED Talk series be?
I already used my conceive, believe, achieve. So now I have to think about something else. I would really want... there's a good one. So one of my pet peeves right now is people using AI as almost like a substitute for them doing their own work. So I think I would title it, Artificial Intelligence is Not Your Friend. And then talk about all the reasons why you can use AI effectively in everything that you do, but how not to use it. Because I really, like, one of the things that I say to people that I supervise, the younger ones now all the time, is use AI as like your assistant, but not as your...
And to substitute you.
Yeah, not to substitute you. If you are accustomed doing something and it takes an hour, and with AI you can do it in 2 minutes. Like, oh gosh, spend 10 minutes to read it over, make sure it makes sense, make sure it sounds like you. I talked to you. I know this didn't come from you,
Yes.
So that would be it.
What is your favorite emoji that you use?
I use the black heart a lot.
Okay. Why?
Yeah.
What's the inspiration behind that?
I love black, and I see red heart so much that I just want it to be different.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I suspect you are... If I give you two options, you're going to choose a third one type of person.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly.
So if you were to go now, if you had the opportunity to speak to 8-year-old Saelese, what piece of advice would you give her?
I would probably tell her to speak up a little bit more because, as I said, like I was very insular. I didn't make friends very easily. And I think a lot of that protected me and shaped me to who I am today. But I'll probably tell her to, not be so afraid. So we were talking about failure earlier, and the kind of child that I grew up as, it was like I was good at a lot of things, great at maybe a few, but like just generally good at most things. So I could pick up something and run with it. But then the things that I felt like I was bad at, I just wouldn't do. Because I was like, okay, I'm good at so many other things, so I'll focus on those. But that manifested itself in some weird ways. So like, for instance, when I got older, one of the things that I felt bad at was driving. So like, I just didn't drive. I just didn't want to. And when my daughter was born, my husband and my schedule just didn't work out in a way that he would be able to drop her to school,
And-
drop me off, and it would have just been too much. So I already had my license, but I wasn't driving, so I had to learn to drive again, And so there's a joke that I've told a couple of people, but in the very first few days when I had to start driving to drop her off, I would literally be in the car just praying okay, Lord, let me just get to school to drop her off. And then I would park there, take a taxi and go to my office.
Wow. That's serious.
And in the afternoon times, take a taxi back and pick her up and drive home. So that continued for the first 2 weeks, I think, of school.
Your husband was aware of that as well?
Yeah, he was. He was probably just oh my
He's
God.
the enabler.
Yeah. I can't deal. At least I get to know how to drive.
Yeah.
In some way.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So now, to wrap up things now, being a young woman running her own business in a leadership position, I'm pretty sure has not been easy, especially in a culture like ours, in a society like ours, and I'm more saying really the world. And navigating through business, through leadership, wouldn't have been an easy task. But now we are seeing in today's society, we have our female president.
Yes.
We have a female prime minister.
The
a
trifecta.
Yes, the
Yes.
trifecta. Probably a female chief justice at some point in time.
Might be.
Yeah. And so we are saying that the glass ceiling is, I don't want to say being broken, it's shattered, right? But it does not negate the fact that there are still challenges that women face, especially in business and especially in leadership. How did you navigate through those challenges? And what piece of advice would you give for up-and-coming young women who are ambitious enough to just believe that my gender has nothing to do with my abilities?
I absolutely love that. And one of the things that I'm a big fan of is doing research, like doing your scan, knowing the environment. And even so, a couple of years ago when I was hiring an assistant, I remember having interviews and we had maybe 5 ladies, 1 gentleman. The chair, not by design, but the chair that they were sitting in across from me was squeaking. So all of the ladies, I could see it. They were afraid to move. They were afraid to shift. They didn't want once they heard that first squeak, they were afraid to even just they were literally just frozen into place. And the man, he was comfortable. He was sitting back. He was moving about. He was, shifting, making himself comfortable. So things like that, I would say, are the difference between being able to go in a room and command attention, the type of attention that you want, that leads to the decisions that you want. So for me, it was observing what other people do differently. Like we say, not that you want to be like a man, but you want to see what makes it that they would be listened to, So it's observing and looking at the traits and characteristics and taking what you think will benefit you. And I think I do a fairly decent job of that because I'm a big fan of research and I'm a big fan of learning and that continuous iteration that we spoke about. And as a woman, I think too, as I said, it's just knowing how to stay true to your goals and kind of just being focused on what you want as an outcome. And that might sound easy, but it's not, because you do have to do that deep dive to actually know what you want. A lot of people, I feel, they have discussions and conversations around what they don't want. You don't want to be poor, but what do you actually want to be successful? How does that look like to you? What do you see yourself doing in your successful self when you get up one morning? Is it working? Is it working for the whole day? Is it working for 4 hours and then going to the beach? Was that for you? And I think once you focus more on that rather than the problems, so solutions, not problems, then that leads to good results.
So, Saelese, the businesswoman, Saelese, the attorney at law, Saelese, the supportive mom who's bringing up a young lady that's probably is going to be one of those big conglomerate CEOs and chairpersons of, group of companies. And I am very grateful for this conversation because it's an important lesson for, and interestingly, your last point, though it was geared for women, young ladies, it really and truly is geared towards all of us. The importance of research, the importance of, being confident in exactly who you are, and really and truly betting on yourself and just taking the risk and trying.
Yeah.
So, Saelese, if somebody wants to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok a little bit less as at LawyerGirl868. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook with my real name, Saelese Haynes. And I also love to talk about my book, which was my sort of love letter to myself, and also like the advice. People often reach out to me on social media and, ask about, okay, how do they do this? Especially how do they get into law? How do they get into business? And so I sat down and wrote that as the advice that I wish I were given. So it's a success. If I made it, here's how. And if you feel like anything that I said resonated and can make sense to you wherever you're at, then feel free to reach out.
Excellent. So, listeners of the Blueprint podcast, there you would have had it. Our conversation with Saelese Haynes, attorney at law, businesswoman, and mother supreme. And in this this conversation was packed with many important points that it is important as young persons, as a matter of fact, as any individual, to bet on yourself, to take the risk, and to be bold. Don't allow present circumstance or society's standards of what you should do, and I want to say even families' standards of what you should do. You set your own standards, be bold, map out your life, and go forward.
Hold yourself accountable.
Hold yourself accountable. So until we see and hear each other again on the Blueprint podcast, thank you very much. Bye.